Thank you very much, Terry, for such a lovely introduction. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening. It's a great privilege to be presenting, and as Terry said, for the first time. So I look forward to sharing my presentation with you. And if you have any questions afterwards, I'd be delighted to try and answer them. So hopefully now you can see my first slide, and I'm going to take us on a bit of a journey this evening through the mystical hierarchies of Theosophy. Speaking for myself, whenever I get into a particular study in Theosophy, I always find it very helpful to try to remember the unity of everything, because one of my own experiences is that when I delve deeply into something like, for example, the hierarchies, I'm always reminded that actually everything is intertwined. So whether it be evolution or whether it be karma or reincarnation, we need to keep in mind the unity of the cosmos and all the universal laws and so on. Nonetheless, it is helpful to dig into particular subjects. And so this evening, we are going to go on a bit of a journey around the hierarchies of Theosophy. So Theosophy teaches us that the universe is structured through a hierarchy of beings, and each one plays a specific role in cosmic evolution. And these beings range from spiritual entities, such as angels and devas, which we will talk about during this evening, to humans, ourselves, and elemental forces. And each being contributes to the maintenance of cosmic law and spiritual growth. A good place to start with any theosophical presentation, of course, is with our founder, and a rather lovely picture of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky here in her younger years. And if we look at The Secret Doctrine in volume 1, she had this rather lovely sentence where she says, "The whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings. They are the agents of karmic and cosmic laws." And I love this idea of an almost endless series of hierarchies and sentient beings. And as we'll see during this evening's presentation, many of the world's religions talk about hierarchies and angels and devas. But Theosophy is very specific in talking about this endless series of beings, which sort of separates Theosophy from many of the world's religions. Not all of them, but many of them, certainly the Western ones. And these beings are often referred to as Dayan Chohans, or angels, and serve as messengers and agents, each performing a unique role based on their level of consciousness and purpose. And this theme comes out again and again as we look at The Secret Doctrine and the Mahatma Letters and other references. So let's dive into The Secret Doctrine, and we'll have a look at some of Blavatsky's words and also in her collected writings before moving into the Mahatma Letters. So HPB talks about angels as Dayan Chohans, and in volume 1, in stanza 5, she refers to them as that, and as the divine beings who assist in the process of cosmic creation. They're described as the architects of the universe. It's a wonderful thought, architects of the universe. When we think of the word architect, responsible for guiding the formation of worlds and life. And then she goes on in volume 1, she talks of angelic hosts as messengers. And Blavatsky discusses the angelic hosts, or the Elohim and messengers of Jewish and Christian traditions, aligning them with the Dayan Chohans of the East. And they serve as agents of karmic law and help in maintaining cosmic balance. Continuing to dive into the secret doctrine, where we see devas continually described as celestial beings. And in volume 2, Anthropogenesis, HPB mentions devas as celestial beings and associates them with higher planes of existence. And these beings represent the higher spiritual forces, often depicted in Vedic and Puranic literature, who assist in guiding human spiritual evolution. This theme of humans being assisted comes up again and again throughout the literature, and we'll see it in several examples this evening. We know the importance of the number 7 in all of our theosophical studies in the current universe, and HPB describes the 7 hierarchies of divine beings, which include the devas and Diane Chohans, are involved in the governance of the cosmos. And this word governance, a bit like a company or a country, actually being governed by various hierarchies. And each hierarchy corresponds to different levels of consciousness and spiritual responsibility in maintaining universal harmony. We can only begin to imagine the gradations of consciousness that exist in this endless hierarchy, when the difference between one level and the next may be enormous. And so it's sort of almost beyond our ability to contemplate the gaps in consciousness that may exist in this hierarchy. Looking at Blavatsky's collected writings, she mentions devas in the context of guiding human evolution and cosmic order, and she refers to them as beings that work from higher planes, influencing the material world. So we see this theme again and again coming through. Angels are discussed in relation to their role as intermediaries between the divine and the human worlds. And Blavatsky likens the angels of Christianity to the devas and Diane Chohans of Eastern traditions. And it's so interesting how so many of the religions have come up effectively with the similar answers, and we'll have a look at that later on this evening. Blavatsky speaks of the cosmic hierarchies as integral to the structure of the universe, integral to the very structure of the universe, with each hierarchy, from the highest spiritual beings to the lowest elemental forces, playing a role in the creation and maintenance of life. And we'll dive into the elementals a little bit later on in this presentation. So, having had a look at the secret doctrine and the collected writings of HPB, it makes sense for us, I think, also to have a look at the Mahatma Letters. As any of you who would have known Alan Hughes from Worthing would know that he was very knowledgeable about the Mahatma Letters. And so I was very lucky to spend a lot of time learning from him. I only have a tiny, tiny fraction of the knowledge that he had. But I regard the Mahatma Letters as a great source of information, and combined with the secret doctrine, really forming the foundation of what I'm sharing with you this evening. And the references to angels, devas, and cosmic hierarchies offer a deeper understanding of theosophical teachings on really the interconnectedness of all life. And angels, again in the form of Diane Chohans and devas, are portrayed in the Mahatma Letters as divine agents who guide and influence the workings of the universe, helping to ensure cosmic order, we see that theme again, and assist in our human evolution. And these references are central to theosophical beliefs and resonate with teachings also from other traditions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism. continuing with the Mahatma Letters, we'll dive into some of the particular letters and have a look at some of the quotes. And we see how consistent the themes are that come through in these various letters. Here we have a picture of one of the masters, KH, and in letter number 10, the Mahatma describes the existence of a vast cosmic hierarchy where different spiritual beings, including what we might call angels or devas, serve various functions in the universe. So each one having different functions. And these beings are described as messengers and agents of karmic and cosmic law. And the quote in letter number 10 is, the Dayan Chohans are the collective hosts of spiritual beings. The angelic hosts of Christianity, the Elohim and the messengers of the Jews, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. This idea of the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will, I think is a lovely series of words. And I'm always struck with the Mahatma Letters, how carefully the masters choose their words. In letter number 22, the Mahatma discusses the role of devas, also known as Dayan Chohans, and emphasizes their involvement in the governance, you see that word again, and the structure of the universe. And these beings exist on different levels of existence, helping to guide and influence the natural and the spiritual world. And the quote here says, there are Dayan Chohans and devas on every grade of existence, from the highest to the lowest. Which is a really interesting point, because in some of our religious thinking, these are all higher. But in theosophical thinking, this runs through all the levels. Moving on to letter number 48, and here we have a picture of a rather kindly looking AP Synod. So you'll all be aware that the Mahatma Letters were effectively a correspondence between the masters and two British gentlemen of the Raj, AP Synod and A.O. Hume. And it's fair to say that AP Synod plays a larger role in it, and is probably the more amenable of the two. And Mr. Hume sometimes a bit more argumentative. But here we see the friendly face of Alfred Synod. And in letter number 48, the Mahatma explains again the roles of angels within the cosmic hierarchy, again linking them to both the Christian and Jewish traditions. Of course, he's talking to Christians here, so that would be a great way to really explain it from a language that they would understand. And they're portrayed as perfected beings who embody divine qualities and maintain cosmic order. And this idea of perfected beings comes up later on when we refer to Blavatsky again. And this idea of the perfection of the evolutionary process. And the quote in letter number 48 is that angels and dhyanis are simply perfected beings, not divine in themselves, but embodying divine qualities. And again, I always feel that this is an area where theosophy kind of diverges from many of the world's religions, because in many of the world's religions, and to some extent in certain theosophical beliefs, there has been this idea of separateness. But here we start to see the idea of the perfection of beings. In other words, the perfection of us as well as we progress. Letter number 68, and here for balance, I've chosen a picture of A.O. Hume. And in this letter, the hierarchy of spiritual beings, again, directly linked to the workings of the cosmos, where different beings serve distinct functions to maintain harmony and balance. This idea of distinct functions comes up quite a lot. These cosmic entities operate in accordance with karmic laws. Again, a really important point, and we'll focus on that again in a moment, and assist in the spiritual evolution of humanity and the world. And the quote from letter number 68, the hosts of spiritual beings are graded into various orders of intelligence, each with its respective mission in the cosmos. Well, this idea of each being in the hierarchy having a particular mission. In letter number 81, further elaborating on how these Dayan Chohans and Devas assist us in our spiritual evolution, and maintaining and highlighting the importance of their role in maintaining the balance between spiritual growth and material existence. And the theme of balance comes up quite regularly. And the quote here saying that man evolves under the guidance of the Devas and Dhyanis, who assist in the gradual unfolding of his higher consciousness. It's rather a wonderful notion that we are actually being assisted in the journey of raising and opening our consciousness. For letter number 93 here, I've chosen a picture of the British Library in London, not the most attractive building in the world, but I'm sure most of you know that the Mahatma Letters are in fact stored inside the British Library in London. And if you make an appointment, you can go in and you can actually see them and have them brought out. And it's incredible to imagine these letters having, in many cases, manifested themselves long before manifestation of written words was normal. Today, we receive emails and text messages and WhatsApp messages and think, oh, that's quite normal. But 150 years ago, it was very unusual. But the Mahatmas seem to have figured out how to do it long before they had any help from Microsoft or Apple. And in letter number 93, again, discussing the hierarchical structure of the universe, the very structure of the universe itself is hierarchical, and how different spiritual beings, including those akin to angels, fit into this cosmic order, and acting as intermediaries again between higher planes of existence and the material world. The quote here says, the universe is a living entity, and every part of it is vitalized and sustained by the Dayan Chohans, who are the transmitters of the divine forces and the architects of the world. And thinking, I always love to dwell on their words, knowing how carefully they will have chosen them. And this idea of the universe as a living entity. Our modern quantum scientists and quantum physicists are beginning to get to that stage now where they're beginning for the first time to think of the very matter of the universe as living in some sense, but they're still not quite there. But when this was written, it would have been so far away from scientific knowledge as to have been heretical and considered madness. And every single part of this universe being vitalized and sustained by these hierarchical beings, transmitting divine forces and being the architects of the world. It's a wonderful quote. It's very important for us as Theosophists, I believe, to really think about this idea that Blavatsky emphasizes, that all beings, including angels and devas, are part of a single evolutionary chain, not separate lines of evolution, which has often been thought, particularly by some of the world's religions, especially in the West, but also, in fact, by certain aspects of Theosophy over the last 100 years or so. And in the autumn version of Esoterica magazine, there's a great article, which is extracted from Blavatsky, Theosophy.com, which explains that according to the teachings of Blavatsky and the Mahatma Letters, even the highest beings, such as the Dayan Chohans or archangels, were once like us, humans, or are on a path to becoming human in future cycles. And we'll talk a bit more about this shortly, but Blavatsky taught that every single being passes through the human stage, which serves as a kind of central pivot in the evolution of consciousness. And I want to talk later on about the importance of humans in this in this hierarchy. And sometimes I like to sort of picture it as like an X with the lower hierarchies below the point where they meet and the higher ones above it, and humans at the point of the meeting. And then this critical halfway point between kind of spirit and matter, where we seem to be in this really, really important part of the journey. But here we see that, in fact, everything has to go through that human stage, and everything is passing on its way towards perfection. And this idea that with this critical position of us as humans, that when we look from the elementals right through to the Dayan Chohans, we see this critical number 7 again, the sevenfold evolutionary structure, with us humans occupying this critical and crucial position in the progression of that journey. And the beings that we think of and call angels are, in fact, perfected humans who have transcended those earthly limitations. Similarly, the elementals that we will talk about shortly are pre-human entities that will evolve into human consciousness in future cycles. It's quite an incredible thought to imagine that all of us here this evening have, in fact, been through the elemental stage and are at some point heading onto the angelic stage. Hopefully not during this presentation. Blavatsky talks about cycles of evolution and further outlines 3 interconnected streams: the monadic or spiritual, the intellectual or mental, and the physical or material. And these streams represent different aspects of the same overarching process of cosmic evolution, which are crucial to understanding the role of hierarchical beings in Theosophy. And the perspective on evolution underpins the hierarchical structure in Theosophy, where all beings evolve within one comprehensive framework. And that's really the critical point. And what I was saying at the very beginning, which is if we keep in mind the unity of everything and the fact that there is no separateness, and this idea of one evolutionary stream within one comprehensive framework, with each one contributing to the cosmic whole at different levels of consciousness. It's quite an amazing thing when we start to contemplate it. There's a little book by someone called Maria Parasen called Angels and Mortals, Their Co-Creative Power. And in it, she talks about emphasizing this collaborative role of angels in guiding human consciousness. And that's a theme that we've seen throughout the Mahatma Letters and throughout the Secret Doctrine, helping, collaborating, guiding. And these beings act as co-creators with mortals, fostering human evolution and our spiritual development. They're depicted in this book and frankly, in all of the literature that I've seen on this subject as both divine messengers and active participants in the shaping of reality. And this aligns with our theosophical teachings, where these higher beings are guiding humanity towards enlightenment. And in difficult times, as we're certainly living through at the moment, with wars and enormously accelerated technical development and populist governments and so on, it's very encouraging to imagine that there is this hierarchy of angelic beings helping to guide humanity. It may not always feel like it's happening, but it's great to know that it is happening. And of course, they have a perspective which is different to ours and can see a picture which is much greater than ours and a part of a much bigger and wider plan. So let's spend a bit of time now talking about the elementals. And the elementals are traditionally categorized based on the 4 classical elements of earth, water, air, and fire. And each class of elementals functions within its respective element and is associated with specific natural forces and characteristics. Elementals are also believed to be influenced by human thought and emotion. This means that they can be shaped and directed by the power of human consciousness, which is why they play a role in occult practices like magic or certain types of meditation. And elementals are important in the workings of nature, but they should not be worshipped or feared. They're simply part of the cosmic order, functioning as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual realms. And when we look back through history, the history of humanity, we can see many, many stories where we as humans have made the error of both practicing various types of occult activity, which has affected the elementals, and also treating them as gods, worshipping them, making sacrifices to them, fearing them. Most of the world's civilizations started actually with their belief system based around fearing and worshipping the elementals. And so it's very interesting in the theosophical teaching to see this idea that we as humans have the power to influence them with our thoughts, which shows us the huge importance of thoughts and emotions. And also this message that they don't need to be feared, but they are a very important part of the cosmic order and of the hierarchy. I've always loved Geoffrey Farthing's work, and his wonderful book, Deity, Cosmos and Man, offers us a really in-depth exploration of various esoteric concepts, including the elementals. And in his treatment of elementals, Geoffrey Farthing describes them as non-human, non-physical entities that exist within the lower planes of nature. They're seen as forces or energies that function in shaping and sustaining the material world. It's a benevolent role that they play. Elementals, according to theosophical teachings, belong to the elemental kingdoms, which are distinct from the human kingdom. Geoffrey Farthing goes on to explain that elementals are essentially nature spirits or forces of nature and are responsible for the phenomena that we observe in the natural world, such as the weather. Now we know who to blame. Growth of trees and plants, etc., and even psychic phenomena. And although they lack individual consciousness and free will as we humans understand it, instead they act automatically and impersonally, being directed by higher beings like the Dayan Chohans, who influence their activities to maintain order in nature. And we might use the analogy of animals, and sometimes, and I mention in a moment about bees and ants. I saw a presentation by Pablo Sander and on YouTube, and he was talking about baby turtles being born on the beach, and hundreds of baby turtles all hatch at the same time and all know that they have to run to the sea. And the sort of question is, how do they know? We call it instinct, but it's a good metaphor for this idea of an intelligence which lacks free will. At least I like to use it that way, and I think it's a very interesting way to think about it. We'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. It's worth just stopping and reminding ourselves, although you've heard me talk about karmic law and obeying the law, that, of course, these angelic beings, however high they are in the hierarchy, or indeed however low they are in the hierarchy, still have to obey karma, the law of laws. And if we look at Eric McGough's paper all about angels, he gives a detailed exploration of angelic hierarchies within Theosophy and explains the same themes that we see in the Mahatma Letters and in Blavatsky's writings about angels being intermediaries between divine and humanity and guiding us, but also specifically pointing out that they have to operate according to karmic law, interacting with humanity to ensure balance and order in the cosmos. So we have a little picture here of a chap who's decided to push a domino over, and if we were to have a moving version of this, we would at some point see the effects of his karma as the domino behind him lands on him. But I don't have a moving slide, so I can't do that. But you can sort of imagine his karma coming round to meet him. So I want to just talk about this notion of free will versus the sort of common good and this idea of instincts and so on. And it comes up quite a lot through all the literature, the devas in Eastern traditions and the angels in the West, both acting for the common good. And it's a little bit like bees in a hive or ants in an ant's nest, sort of acting with intelligence and acting to some purpose. But in the case of the hierarchy above us, they appear to have matured to a point where they're able to manage that without perhaps some of the errors that we as human beings make with our combination of intelligence and free will. And we're sort of disconnected sometimes from nature, and we can see that in the problems in the world, whether it be the problems of environmental destruction or the way we treat nature and animals, that humans with our free will have sort of separated ourselves in many cases. But that's, again, I think, this point of us being at this crossover point with no longer just simply acting out of instinct, but having free will, but not necessarily the maturity to always be able to do the right thing. And here I reference the myth of the forbidden fruit as a metaphor for humanity's choice to disconnect from the divine, with the path back to unity requiring a rediscovery of our spiritual harmony. I should mention the 7 rays and their cosmic importance. And of course, the hierarchical structure also has to encompass the 7 rays as emanations of this great divine energy that guide cosmic evolution. And each ray is said to be led by a Dhyani Chohan or Buddha and represents different qualities similar to vibrations or frequencies. And these rays influence everything from human consciousness to the movements of celestial bodies and serve as conduits for the divine will. And of course, some people have studied how people are made up of different parts of different rays, and a bit like astrology and how that affects us and so on. I'm not an expert on that subject, so I'm not going to go into that here. So the next few slides, I'm just going to take us on a little bit of a quick canter through some of the world's religions, because I think it's really interesting to contemplate the fact that the world's religions, frankly, don't get on very well generally, but they have pretty well all come up with the same version of events when it comes to hierarchies. So what this tells me is that this belief seems to be sort of knowledge that we have as human beings. It seems to be in our DNA. We seem to have this omnipotent knowledge, and it's found its way into all of the religions. And in Christianity, in both the Old and New Testaments, in the Bible, of course, we see Gabriel and Michael, and these two angels are mentioned as messengers and protectors. Gabriel appears to Daniel and the Virgin Mary, while Michael's seen as a warrior angel battling evil in Revelations. In Isaiah, in the Old Testament, the seraphim are depicted as beings with 6 wings praising God. And the cherubim are described as guardians of the Garden of Eden in Genesis, and depicted also in Ezekiel's vision. In Judaism, in the Talmud and the Torah, we have the Malachim, the Hebrew term for angels, and it appears throughout the Torah, such as the angel who stops Abraham from sacrificing Isaac in Genesis. Angels also appear in Jacob's vision of a ladder to heaven. And in the Talmud, the Metatron is a powerful angelic being, considered one of the most exalted in the hierarchy, and sometimes seen as a lesser manifestation of God. In Islam, in the Quran, we have Jibril, or Gabriel, and the archangel Jibril is the primary messenger angel who delivered revelations to the Prophet Muhammad. He's mentioned in several places, including the Surah Al-Baqarah and the Surah Maryam. And Michael, or Michael, is responsible for providing sustenance to human beings and the natural world. Israfil, who is in fact Raphael as well, is the angel who will blow the trumpet to signal the day of judgment. Raphael also represents healing and medicine in many traditions. Having a look at Buddhism and Zoroastrianism. In Buddhism, first of all, in the Tripitaka, devas appear frequently in the Sutta Pitaka. In the Digha Nikaya, devas, including Sakka, Indra, interact with the Buddha and ask questions about the Dharma. They reside in various heavens, such as the Tavatimsa heaven. And in Zoroastrianism, in the Avesta, we see the Amesha Spentas. These are 6 divine beings in Zoroastrianism who serve Ahura Mazda and oversee different aspects of creation, like Asha Vahishta, or truth, and Vahumana, good mind. And then we have the Yazatas, lesser divine beings, similar to angels, responsible for natural phenomena and moral order. Mithra and Anahita are amongst the most well-known Yazatas. Perhaps these are more similar to elementals. In Hinduism, in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, Indra, Agni, and Vayu are mentioned as devas who control elements like fire, rain, and wind, respectively. Again, this elemental idea. And in the Upanishads, they discuss the devas in metaphysical terms, identifying them as aspects of the cosmic order, Rata. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there is mention of devas who participate in rituals and maintain the cosmic balance. We see these themes again and again. Devas are also seen as protectors of the cosmos, contributing to both material and spiritual evolution. Lots of similarities. if we were to look at all the world's religions, I think it's fair to say we would probably find a hierarchy in pretty much all of them, whether it be West Africa or whether it be the indigenous religions. There seems to be a human knowledge of this, which seems to come out in all of our religious expression. And in our more secular age now, as we are experiencing, it seems to be coming out through entertainment. And it's estimated that literally hundreds of movies have been made featuring angels, archangels, and similar celestial beings across a whole variety of different genres. There's classic films, romantic dramas, comedies, thrillers, and even horror movies. Some sources suggest that there have been over 200 films, including angels, and they're particularly prevalent in Christian or Western traditions, where angels seem to be a frequent theme. Here's a few examples. In this picture here, one of the most famous Christmas movies ever made, It's a Wonderful Life, is actually centered around an angel coming down to help a man who was suicidal. Many, many films have featured angels during the Christmas period. And I mentioned It's a Wonderful Life. We also have The Bishop's Wife, and there's countless others. And there's a long-standing tradition, guardian angels and heavenly interventions. In the fantasy and supernatural genres, films like City of Angels, Constantine, Legion, and Dogma explore angels and celestial battles, often with modern or darker interpretations of angelic beings. And then in comedy as well, there are movies like Michael and Angels in the Outfield, bringing heartwarming stories about angels intervening in human affairs. There are many, many TV series. And so, again, this idea that this is sort of in our psyche, it seems to be in our knowledge, some kind of inner innate understanding that this archetype of the angel comes out, whether it be in religion or in culture. You would only have to walk around an art gallery to see how many examples of angels in the world of art there are. Talking about the hierarchical structure in nature, and I'm reminded always of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, and the idea of studying the micro in order to understand the macro. And it's interesting to think that, just as atoms combine to form molecules, which in turn then form cells, the cosmic hierarchy operates similarly. Higher beings guide lower ones in an interconnected system. And if you think about the human body, we have this idea of cells, individual cells, which we're kind of happy to accept that they have some form of consciousness, but they operate under the guidance of a bigger system. It might be our endocrine system or our immune system or our brain. And so this idea in the human body of the higher guiding the lower, but the lower still having some intelligence of its own, is actually seems to be a microcosm of this wider cosmic picture that we're being given by the Theosophical teachings. It seems that as humans, we've got the ability to be conscious of both the higher and the lower states, and perform some kind of role of bridging that gap between spirit and matter. So my presentation is drawing to a close. It's right that I should end with Madame Blavatsky and give her the last word. And I've chosen a picture here of her in slightly later years. And you heard me talk earlier about this evolutionary path and that we're all on one path. And her exact words here are that no being can become God or deva unless he passes through the human cycles, which is, an incredible thought. She also says every spirit, so-called, is either a disembodied or a future man. Again, an incredible thought for us to end our teaching on. And it really puts us in perspective that here we are this evening, sharing these ideas. All of us are so ancient that we have been through this entire journey of evolution, through the entire elemental sphere, and we come together now. And ahead of us lies this enormous hierarchy, this endless hierarchy above us. Hopefully that will be an inspiring thought, not an exhausting one. Thank you very much for listening to me this evening. A great pleasure, and thank you.